this country for something we would be more than happy to go earn. And so we have an infrastructure here. This is really the center of the universe in the Pacific Northwest for milling capacity. It's the last stronghold left, and we're on the verge of losing it if we can't figure out how to return our federal ownership. 58% of the timber in this state is under federal ownership. If we can't figure out how to return that to some sort of sustainable level, we're going to lose it. So again, we're here to support moving forward and returning this land back to what it can be.
Sorry. I'm Knox Marshall. I'm the resource manager for Murphy Company. We have milling facilities in Eugene, Oregon, Sutherland, Oregon, just north of here, and in Rogue River and Medford. The urgency is critical for our company because we rely on federal material. We have no land ownership in the company, and we're a small family-owned company. So we employ somewhere around 450 people in the state of Oregon. Our facilities are dependent on Douglas fir and trees that come out of the dry forest. We recently acquired a mill in the state of Washington because we have the need to derive a sustainable product for our facilities, and it's a little bit more sustainable up there from the public sources. And we did that for survival, but we continue to want to grow. We want to employ the people in the South. And to key off of what Dr. Franklin said, we have the same vision for the forest. We see those forests down there. Our facility in Medford is a small log facility, and we believe it is a tool necessary to accomplish some of the treatments that are needed down there, and we want to keep it there. But right now, with the little amount of volume coming out of Southern Oregon, it doesn't look bright. The future does not look bright for that facility. We need a much more sustainable and more predictable supply to come from the federal forest in order to keep that facility going.
Excuse me. Do you want to talk about some of the specifics?
Sure. First of all, Mr. Secretary, I'll introduce myself. Tom Parton. I'm president of the American Forest Resource Council. I briefly had a chance to talk to you in D.C. a few months ago, and it's always good to catch up. American Forest Resource Council represents about 90 forest products manufacturers throughout the West: Oregon, Washington, California, and Idaho. And a few things that we have in common is kind of a snapshot of the folks you see here. Most of the companies are small family-owned companies. We're located in rural communities. We depend on federal forests, and oftentimes our facilities are the mainstays of the jobs in those rural communities. You hear a lot of things about the building industry right now. Housing starts are down, we're in a recession, we're in a slump. Why is federal timber so important right now? Federal timber is so important right now because it is a timber that's always priced at market rates. If the markets are down, federal timber is priced and appraised at lower prices. When it goes back up, it's priced at higher prices. So our companies are looking more closely now at federal wood than we are in other markets. We need it. We need it desperately. Our folks do have markets. We can move our wood. All we need is a cheap supply of timber. So as I encourage you to recognize that right now is the most important time for federal wood for our members. Two of the organizations or groups you oversee in your job are the BLM and the Fish and Wildlife Service. They have a variety of problems, but a couple of the problems are the same. For instance, the BLM right now has problems with overcrowded forests. We have forest health issues. We have forests that are approaching catastrophic wildfire levels, and we have forests that have insect and disease on them, much like you're familiar with in Colorado with the pine beetle just absolutely killing those forests. We're not quite there yet, but these forests are set up in a condition where it could be. We've experienced large wildfires in Oregon in past years with the Biscuit Fire in southwest Oregon that burned about 500,000 acres. The Fish and Wildlife Department. Fish and Wildlife has a problem. They're trying to deal and manage the spotted owl. Spotted owl numbers have been declining for 20 years. We're trying to come up and remedy that. Part of the problem with their survivability, as was pointed out in the last recovery plan, is we're losing habitat to wildfire. We've had severe wildfires in southwest Oregon, as I just mentioned, with the Biscuit Fire, with timbered rock and others. So they're having a problem with kind of the similar issues. The answer to both of those problems, from our perspective, is that we need to better manage our forests. As Dr. Franklin and Dr. Johnson pointed out, we need to get in and we need to reduce the fiber per acre out there. We need to do more thinnings. We need to make these forests healthy, and if we make the forest healthy, we're going to have a forest that's healthy for the spotted owl. So we see much of the solution in both of your departments having the same end. We need to get in there and more actively manage our forests. We've got some problems facing us. We have the survey and manage issue, which I'm sure Dr. Johnson knows all about. Didn't have a chance to mention it. We have to figure out what we're going to do in this spotted owl recovery plan. We're very nervous about just taking a philosophy of all we need to do is set more lands aside and they'll do better. We've tried that for 20 years and that hasn't been the solution. We need to take a different approach that really actively manages our land. And we're nervous about this recovery plan in that it talks about setting more acres aside of private land. That hasn't been the trajectory historically, and we really don't think that's the answer now. And then we have, as somebody mentioned, the red tree bowl. We find one red tree bowl, you set 10 acres aside. Most of our forests have red tree bowls all over. So if you take this philosophy of finding one red tree bowl and setting 10 acres aside, pretty soon you don't have a forest to manage. And unfortunately, that's where we're at right now. And if I could just wrap up, and seeing you out here visiting this area is so important. Some of us in this area that's depended on the wood off the BLM in Southwest Oregon kind of feel like it's been the sacrifice zone. We had a plan that was developed, the Walker plan. It wasn't accepted by this administration. It was pulled back, but yet in a year and a half, we haven't had a solution since that time. So we're looking at you to take us out of this sacrifice zone and really create some solutions for us. And again, thank you for being out tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm going to let Paul go to work.
You know how to use it, don't I?
You don't have to, you give it back.
No, we'll take it.
Can I ask you a question, Paul?
Yes, sure.
So just, so Paul or whoever that comes from the timber industry, so the proposal that was presented here by Dr. Johnson and Dr. Franklin in terms of a number of different ideas, including moving forward with some pilot projects. Have you had an opportunity to review their work, and what would be your general response?
I was on that field trip, and that was one of the things I actually wanted to mention and get to talking and forget exactly where I'm going. But the interesting part of that trip was sitting down on the first stop. It was dry site, and it was extremely frustrating. Our good doctors described a prescription, a marking prescription that actually marked a fair amount of timber. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but there were parts of it that I liked. I could live with it. It was an economically viable timber sale. Had it been a mark on a timber sale, it would have sold. It would have worked. It would have provided money to the county. It would have provided us with the material that we can use. It was good for the environment. In their mind, we've got two of the preeminent forest ecologists in the world telling us that if we do this, this is good. So it's viable from our standpoint. It provides a raw material that we can use. It's good for the environment. We got a win-win. The problem is what I heard from the environmental community that day was it had a commercial component.
Okay. I think we're gonna stop there, but I got that, and I did discuss this with Secretary Salazar on the way down, Paul, but I thank you. We want to try and stick to the schedule, but I shared your frustration because the scientists were pointing towards something that was designed for sustainable forests, which are not in a currently sustainable state, and the concern did seem to be, well, there's some real volume coming out of here, and that's not the point. So I hope the environmental community addresses that concern in their remarks here, because I didn't understand it at the time. If scientists say this is what we need to do, so these ponderosas will be here 100 years from now, and then you say, well, gee, you're taking out trees that don't belong there, that are too big, and they're threatening those ponderosas. I didn't get it either, so I share your frustration. I hope they address that. Let's go now to the conservation. Mr. Secretary, you trump me every time. Go ahead.
I want to, I know
these issues, and I'll make some more comments after we hear from everybody, but these issues have obviously been around for a long time. This is a 30-year source of conflict, which is creating huge pain from a number of different angles here. So I have these two good professors, Johnson and Franklin, who I think are respected by a lot of people who are, since they have been working on this for a very long time. And they've come up with a set of ideas that they would like me to consider. And my sense, Paul and Tom, from what you were telling me, is that you think there is some merit in the ideas that I have heard from these two professors. That's a yes, right?
That's a yes.
That's a yes. Is that a yes from everybody on the Dipper side, that there's some good ideas in here?
Yep, some.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
All right, here we go. We'll now turn to the conservation community. Same thing. You can use your time as you wish, divide it up however you wish. Doesn't have to be the people on the agenda. And it was about 50 minutes and 30 seconds on that side after I deducted the time for the Secretary's questions. So I'll do the same thing on your side. 15 minutes, 30 seconds. Go.
I'm Andy Kerr with the large company. I'll let you in a little secret. The conservation community is organized like Somali warlords. So we're going to all say something because we came this distance. And we all are going to limit ourselves to a minute and a half.
Could you speak up, please?
Okay.
I'm going to...
I'll turn this up as loud as I can, Jerry, and then Andy, just speak up some more for Jerry.
Yes. So I'm going to say thank you to the Secretary, to the Senator, and the Congressman for coming here. We really appreciate it, so we all don't have to repeat ourselves on that. So we will make our salient points with that. And so I first want to turn to Mary Spurlock of Pacific Rivers Council.
Thank you.
And if you guys can just move this around, but move it around gently because the volume's very high and you don't want to blow Jerry's ears out.
No, that
so,
would be messy.
Okay. And if it's too loud, Jerry, let us know because I turned it way up.
Thank you.
Hi, Jerry. Pacific Rivers Council is also really pleased to be here today. And we want you to know that we're always willing to collaborate and talk about forest management, improving forest management, improving the public natural resources that we all benefit from. We're basically here to focus on the watersheds, the water, and the fish that we think every single one of us in here agrees is essential to sustaining our communities and our economies, especially in an era of climate change. So the perspective that I bring, and I'm going to talk only about my perspective, that we bring is this. The streamside forests are extensively damaged by logging and roads still. And they are unable, in many cases, to form the healthy, diverse stream habitats needed to support native aquatic species, including salmon. Sediment inputs from too many under-maintained or poorly located roads further threaten clean water and fish survival. So for us, the problem or the solution is fairly simple. There are two critical areas where we should not be looking for more timber volume. The two areas that are the most connected to the health of streams. These are the near stream or riparian areas and steep and unstable slopes. And these areas were recognized as critical and protected from non-restorative management in the Northwest Forest Plan, which is why they are off limits to program timber harvest. Over the last 15 years, the critical role of these areas has not been diminished by any new or conflicting science. Management proposals that seek significant timber volume from riparian reserves or steep and unstable slopes are highly likely to fail. For watersheds, removing roads and improving the design of those that remain is highly effective to protect and improve streams while creating jobs. So 3 elements must be part of any lasting future plan: adequate riparian protection, unstable slope protection, and road remediation, even as we seek to do restoration.
Thank you. Cindy Hawes with Umpqua Watershed.
Thank you, Secretary Salazar. And I would like to mention, first of all, Umpqua Watersheds was in the collaborative process every single day with Roseburg BLM this past, from January basically until the end of this couple weeks ago. And we were there every day. Many of our members and many of our neighbors and family were there at the table talking about this, because Umpqua Watersheds is a local conservation organization with deep roots in our community. And we certainly want to be supportive of the collaborative process, and I have to tell you that we were out in the field, the industry wasn't there a lot. And it was very frustrating for us because we didn't have this opportunity to have this two-way discussion that we're talking about here, that you folks are asking about in terms of why there are issues and what are the problems with taking out these different pieces during the thinning process. And that puts me into another element of this, and that is, as a wildlife biologist, because I have many years as a wildlife biologist, I have a completely different perspective on the ecosystem and the ecosystem processes and function that are very different from a forest ecologist in terms of that standing mass, biomass, the large biomass, and how it functions to develop into future forest conditions. And so it's not as easy as it may seem. We have our own Science Advisory Council that was involved in reviewing these proposals, and I'd like to say that I would love to have much more conversation and have a bigger Science Advisory Council that gets into the trade-offs so that there's a greater understanding of what the true issues are.
Next is Frances Etherington with Cascadia Wild, and Cindy's going to put that pink piece of paper and give you a 20-second warning.
Oh, okay.
Move the thing over, whatever, speaker, just a little closer.
My organization, Cascadia Wildlands, works with the Roseburg BLM and the Coos Bay BLM timber sale program in the NEPA process. We have appreciated that in the last few years, these BLM districts have not targeted mature and old-growth forests for logging. Yet the timber has been flowing out abundantly from these two districts. And it feels like it's been a steady, sustainable amount of timber. For instance, in 2010, the Roseburg BLM district sold over 37 million board feet and 13 timber sales to 12 timber companies. And in 2008, they sold over 44 million board feet. Timber has also been flowing out of the Coos Bay BLM land. Every year since 2007, they have far exceeded their annual timber target of 27 million board feet. And virtually all this volume is coming from managed plantations. It's volume that is necessary thinning of managed, overstocked tree plantations. Most have been totally uncontroversial. We have supported this level of logging, and there is many years left of these important thinning projects that still need to be done. And most of this has been on the wet forest. Coos Bay BLM is all wet. Roseburg BLM is about 2/3 of a wet forest. Now, recently I've also been part of the collaboration process, and so I really look forward to this plan of Norman Jerry's for the dry forest type and to continue this discussion on the dry forest type. Because I believe that we do need to provide timber and jobs to my local community right here in Roseburg.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frances. Ivan Milisky of the Sierra Club.
Secretary Salazar, Congressman and Senator, thanks so much for being here today to discuss these issues. I'm Ivan Milisky. I'm with the Oregon Chapter Sierra Club. We have nearly 20,000 members in Oregon. A few key points I want to leave you with today. Certainly some of the principles in the paper that Drs. Johnson and Franklin circulated are very important. Protection of old-growth forests, focus on restoration. These are key elements and we can get behind those. I think it's important to remember that Southwest Oregon has quite a diversity of forests. We do have moist coniferous forests, close to the type you'd see perhaps in northern Oregon or Washington. We also have the dry forests that we've discussed a little bit today. Oregon's Global Warming Commission, which is a diverse group of stakeholders looking at making recommendations, that essentially suggests that we should stay out of older west side forests and allow them to accumulate carbon. And when we're looking at drier forests, we should look at managing fuels, but we should also be very careful that we're going to have carbon impacts in the short term if we remove fuels too intensively. So what that leads us to suggest is that in the end of the day, this is really site specific, and we have to make very certain that what we're doing, even on the landscape scale, takes into account very site specific changes. That's why we have to have the scientists very involved. That's why we have to have a diverse group of scientists and a lot of local collaborative input from local stakeholders. Lastly, I think that we need to be ensuring that we are creating economic diversification. We have a lot of mill owners around the table today. That's great. But we need to make sure that we are looking at restoration in the context of how can we create other types of jobs. I would just direct you in my final seconds here to the Ecosystem Workforce Program at the University of Oregon. They've done a tremendous amount of research that has shown the economic multiplier effects. When you spend $1 million in Oregon's woods restoring salmon, restoring streams, certainly involving some forestry, you can actually create a tremendous economic benefit coming out of that. There's years of this research done on the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board's programs. And so, let's look at these lands as helping to create economic diversity and restoration in addition to just to the forestry side. And the last piece I'll leave you with is I think we do have to reauthorize county payments. I think we need to make sure that that's a little bit of a separate discussion than the timber outputs, because we cannot, if we're going to live in a world with less timber coming off of federal lands, we're going to have to find alternative ways to support county payments. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph Vale, Klamath Wildlands Center.
Well, I'll say thank you, even though Andy told us not to. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's incredible for Southwest Oregon. We had George Bush come, but this is close to that level of importance. So I work at a group, the Klamath Wildlands Center in Southwest Oregon. We work in Northern California as well as Southwest Oregon, and on public lands for the most part. We work to protect our outstanding ecosystems that we have in this region. And over the past few years, we've worked with a lot of stakeholders on the type of collaborative groups that we've talked a little bit about here today. And we've had a lot of success, actually. The Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, which is immediately adjacent to the Medford BLM, which was brought up earlier, has actually met or exceeded its timber targets for the last 5 years in a row by focusing on restoration forestry. So we have had a lot of success doing that, looking at those plantations that we've talked about, looking at dry forests and thinning them out to a more sustainable level. At that same time, it's important to note the BLM was planning the Western Oregon Plan revisions, which was not about restoration, which was about a lot of clear cutting of federal forests. So I think it's important to put this in context of where we find ourselves on the BLM lands today. We haven't really given a good shot at restoration forestry there. I also spent the better part of last week with Dr. Johnson and Dr. Franklin, and we're out in the woods, and it's a big balancing act. There's a lot of challenges we have with restoring forests and the old-growth ecosystem and the northern spotted owl, and so I think that we are excited to work in good faith on collaboratively developed projects. We think there's a lot of good stuff, some good stuff, probably the opposite good stuff that Paul sees in the plan, but there's definitely good stuff that we want to, and our 2,000 members that live in this checkerboard ownership pattern of BLM that we find ourselves in. We're excited to sit down at the table and get more going on these forests and make them restoration the type of management that we do.
Thank you. Mike Dennis of Nature Conservancy.
Thanks.
Terry, you're transfer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Travis. My name is Mike Dennis, and I'm with the Nature Conservancy, and just wanted to highlight two what we think of as promising models for how science and collaboration can work effectively in restoring federal forests. And the first is the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Act, or program, which both the Senator and Congressman have been big supporters of. We think it's one of the most promising opportunities on the table to really look at landscape scale restoration, to think about how we can improve forests at a larger scale, and how we can support local economies by providing jobs and also providing a steady wood supply. And the Deschutes National Forest Skyline Project was just one that was selected, which will be, as a collaborative forest landscape restoration program. It spans an area of 133,000 acres, had support, letters of support from over 30 different organizations of varying viewpoints, and is really, when it gets down to it, just going to provide saw logs as well, which is a concern we're talking about here. So we believe that this is an excellent model to think about some of the problems we're looking at here. And I would just note that in Region 6, three of the top 10 national proposals for the CFLRP came from Region 6, which indicates both a demand for further collaboratives and a real need to help get them ramped up in a larger scale. The second example is the Ashland Forest Resiliency Project, over 22,000 acres, a stewardship project in the City of Ashland's municipal watershed that is going to, again, be helping to get local jobs, working in restoration, and providing significant timber volumes as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Doug Hyken with Oregon Wild.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us into this very important conversation. I'd just like to remind us how far we've come and to celebrate our successes under the Northwest Forest Plan. Before the Northwest Forest Plan, we were liquidating old-growth forests at a rate of thousands of acres a year. This was driving species towards the brink of extinction: the spotted owl, the marbled murrelet, and salmon. Salmon streams and trout streams were being polluted with sediment from logging roads. The Northwest was emitting carbon at a rate 100 times the global average rate from land use related emissions. And too many mills were dependent on this unsustainable federal program of old growth liquidation. And the economy suffered